Here, the University of Pennsylvania, but also South African born. Tobias is a little idly supplied. So, and what I want to just tell you very quickly is that this year I've just taken over as the director of the Academic Center at Penn. I have taught a MOOC, Listening to World Music, which is one of Penn's first humanities courses, and to their surprise as well as to mine, I had 37,000 students registered this week, so they were in the class, okay? But so I have a little bit of experience with MOOCs. I'm refilming it, and it's taken me 2 years to refilm what I actually did in 3 weeks before, which tells you something. It's going to be filmed now in the Penn Museum using the resources of the Museum of Anthropology and Archaeology, which has no sound. So it's an interesting kind of challenge. But one of the things that I am interested in because of the online, I've done a lot of online teaching, regular Penn student stuff as well, is to develop Africa content, actually in partnership with African institutions. This is a kind of pipe dream of mine. We have to work out, and to use the resources here at Penn across all the schools, and to work out how we can partner in Africa. So that's really where if any of you are interested in talking to me about that, this is my little sales pitch right now. This is not my panel. We have 3 wonderful presenters from actually 3 different countries, educational resources. He's a professor in the Center for Distance Education at Athabasca University, Canada's Open University based in Alberta, Canada, and I'm going to just keep, he's the director of the Technology Enhanced Knowledge Research Institute, or TechRE, and he's a co-editor of the International Review of Research in Open and Distance Learning. So very, very well, qualified person for this panel. So I'm going to just turn it over to him so that I don't waste any time. I'm going to give you 12 minutes max, and then I'm going to stop.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm going to speak very quickly because I have a lot to get through. I would like to add that I'm also just recently the International Council for Open and Distance Education chair as well. So I have to give them credit for this. Note these slides are all under Creative Commons license. Some of the images are there under Fair Dealing or Fair Use license. I work closely with these chairs, Wayne McIntosh and Fred Mulder, and I'm also part of the Policies for OER Uptake, a Euro project for looking at policies in over 60 different countries about open educational resources. And this project has just started where we are mapping the world of MOOCs and knowledge mobility. Some of the obstacles to MOOC development, well, number one, the price, not the cost. And please understand that, because a lot of people don't understand that, is that the cost of delivering communications is dropping exponentially, and it's going to continue to drop exponentially. The price isn't. And my view is because it's controlled by, we have too many monopolies, and they're controlling the prices. And this is a particular problem in Africa and in other developing countries, much more so than in Canada. Access, people need the mobile devices for access, and I think although there's an obstacle, there aren't enough of them, it's also an opportunity. Language and literacy, of course, most people don't understand English, and even some who understand English, their literacy skills are not developed enough. There are many content restrictions in commercial content, and I'm going to go into that more deeply further on. And it's the privileged monopolies. And we heard people talking about intellectual property. In British common law, which most English-speaking countries follow, and the United States, they talk about intellectual property, but really what it is a privileged monopoly that we give to these publishers. And they use the Orwellian word intellectual property. It is neither intellectual nor property. What it is a privileged monopoly that we give them if they're supporting education. Policy issues, we need more clarity on copyright, particularly internationally, and I'd suggest to you that it becomes impossible with commercial content to run international courses unless you own the content yourself. And to make deals among different countries with copyrighted material is impossible. So we need clarity on sharing, on fair use, fair dealing. Fair dealing, fair use allows large amount of use, free and liberal use of all kinds of commercial content that we can use, and we are interpreting it too strictly. Version control and backup, of course, we have to have systems in place to keep our content up to date. Quality assurance, we've got to make sure we're using quality material, which we do better than they do in traditional classroom-based universities. But we need to do it better and keep it up. And I mentioned about the international laws being different. So they talk about intellectual property, and as they say, you know, ooty wooty sweet patootie. It's neither intellectual nor property. And we've got to start getting away from that term and using the term, the correct term, which is privileged monopoly. These publishers have a monopoly that we've given them as a privilege because that will help in the promotion of learning and the useful arts. Check the origin, the original copyright laws, the Constitution of the United States, Queen Anne's Law. They have a privileged monopoly. In law, in Canada, all the British Commonwealth countries in the United States, it is not property. And there's been court decisions showing that it is not property. Another problem with commercial content is digital rights management and digital licenses. And digital rights management is called by the publishers, I call it digital restrictions management. It's how they restrict you from doing what you want with your device. And if through digital rights management, they stop you from doing any one or all of these things: copy and pasting, text-to-speech, format changing, moving the material, printing it out, moving it geographically, using it after an expiry date, and resell it. So they stop you from doing that. They control your device to stop you from doing that. And this is supported legally by their digital licenses. And when you click on that digital license, how many here have actually read a digital license? Oh, there's a few nerds in this room. I thought I'd be the only one. I usually am. Okay, they're very long and almost impossible to decipher. But what you agree to when you click on that license is that the owners have no liability, even if the product doesn't work. You've agreed to that. You've also agreed that they can come into your computer at any time without further permission and collect and use your personal data for whatever reason they want. Not to help improve their software, for any reason they want to use it. You've agreed to that. You've also agreed that you don't own it, that you have a privilege to use the product, and you don't own it. And here's the kicker, is it's prohibited for you to show your content to somebody else. It's a criminal offense in many jurisdictions now. So if you show it to your spouse, you must immediately delete it from the computer and notify them right away. You are not allowed to do that. And you must also accept that you have no rights. We know in our jurisdictions that we have fair use and fair dealing rights. But when you click on that, you've agreed that you've given them away. You don't have them anymore. So they're very restrictive. And it restricts our freedom so much that I would argue, and I believe with very good case on this, is we can't use commercial content in MOOCs. And I know in Australia there's been a few studies of that, and they know they cannot use a MOOC, create a MOOC with commercial content. It's impossible because of their strict digital rights management and digital licenses. So, digital rights management, it restricts our freedom, and the question is, can we not own and control our own property? They put locks on our property. Now this is property, that's my tablet. I own that, that is real property. What their privileged monopoly is trying to do is saying you can only use it in the way we want you to use it, where we want you to use it, when we want you to use it. But we're innocent. We don't deserve this. So, I'm suggesting that what we must do as educators is we move quickly towards open e-textbooks. So as we can copy and paste, highlight, print it out, move it geographically, and retain all of our privacy and digital rights. Open education resources are essential for the implementation of MOOCs in an educational environment. They're essential for e-learning implementation. The access rights, the vendors can control how, when, where, and with what specific brand of technological assistance audiences are able to access content. They want full control over you and your device. It's a new concept they brought into the world. You remember that world where we used to live in, where you bought something and you got it? We now live in a world you buy, but you don't get it. What you get is a huge bunch of restrictions. You know, you buy a lollipop and it says you can only lick it on one side at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when you're in the car or something. That is exactly what they're doing with educational content. David Wiley reminds us that openness is the skeleton key that unlocks every attempt at vendor control and lock-in. So no matter how much they try to control us and lock us in, if we're open, they can't do it. And here's something in the Coursera website, the statement of accomplishment. So you get your statement of accomplishment, you've completed the course. They have in their license, you may not use as part of any tuition-based or 4-credit certification or program. So you get a certificate and you can't use it. You're not allowed to use it. And this is a totally new concept. Like, makes it a useless piece of paper. If you can't use it for showing people what you know, then it's useless. And but they have that restriction in there. And this brings in an even newer concept of you buy but you don't get. But now you learn but you don't own what you learn. Coursera owns what you learn. And this is a very new concept in learning. So, resources for access, the mobile internet is important, open education resources. We need to localize, we need instructors, peer mentors to work, and we need open assessment. And mobile learning is becoming more and more important. There's more time now spent on the internet with mobile than with desktops. And I know many of us are still developing things like desktops, and we've got to stop that. People are accessing the internet with their mobile devices. 4.5 billion mobile subscriptions, 1.5 billion mobile internet users. 90% of the world's population is covered by cellular. And 1 out of every 3 people who access the internet only access it using a mobile device. We can use these new phablets, which are becoming very popular in Asia. So as it's not quite a tablet, it's not small as a phone. This and many other mobile devices are coming available for us to use as education. Another issue we need to get at is how do we assess and accredit learners who learn on their own on the internet. And we have a report on that. It's available at the Commonwealth of Learning site. So the opportunities we have, mass individualization, we need interoperability standards, and English as an international language is important as well, so we can reach far more people because of those things. Now, we have started and we are working now with the Open Educational Resources University, 31 university and colleges and 5 continents working together. And the problem is this, that learners who access open education resources and acquire knowledge and skills, they cannot have their learning assessed and accredited. So we are creating OER pathways to learning and accreditation. And these institutions are agreeing to recognize each other's credits around the world. And it's like this diagram says it best. The old model is our students using our faculty, using our courses, and they take our exam. And the new model of OERU is any learner, anywhere, anybody, using any faculty or no faculty at all, or mentors, student mentors, using any materials, even not just OER, but any materials. But if they want an Athabasca University credential, we give them the assessment. If they want a UNISA credential, UNISA gives them the assessment. And that's the model we're using as part of the OER University. So a course can now be disaggregated. You can have the MOOC being the content, the accreditation, the formal assessment by the institution, and the peer learning can be informal, online, or even in formal groups and different. But they can all be different, and they don't all have to be under the same bundle. The disaggregation. Now, for economic health and social outcomes, OER, of course, has cost savings with them. OER creation and adaptation brings local jobs. There's medical information can go out to large groups of people, and we can build international communities. So these are really important economic health and social outcomes that can come from MOOCs. But the real squeeze exerted by MOOCs may not be on the campus face-to-face learning format, but rather on the paid-for online formats. So there's a real threat to open universities like ours and to the online sections of other universities. And that's one of the real threats in MOOCs. But OER can be a key to economic growth, and Sir John Daniel and David Killian told us that OER could do more to stimulate global economic demand and growth than all the world's tax holidays combined, then multiplied tenfold. So there's a real key to economic growth there. And Professor Whitesides tells us that affordability in the future may be the first requirement, not an afterthought. The race may not be to the swift, but to the cheap. So it's a tool for development. Mass education is possible. You can have localization and internationalization. You can have both. The world economy is online, so our students need to be online. And we need just-in-time training. And it's perfect on the web, and having MOOCs on the web, we can work on just-in-time training for employers and trades that are in deficit. But what's happening with MOOCs is that Cinderella, the old distance education, is becoming a princess. Distance education is now the princess, and I think this is a wonderful development. I've lived through 30 years of being a Cinderella, and now I'm so happy to be a princess. Now, the Royal Society, which is the oldest scientific society in the world, says this: the restriction of the commons by patents, copyright, and databases is not in the interests of society and unduly hampers scientific endeavor. Pope Benedict XVI, the former pope, said, on the part of rich countries, there is excessive zeal for protecting knowledge through an unduly rigid assertion of the right to intellectual property. What does this tell us? That both science and God is on our side. Thank you.
Perfect. So I think we'll do the three presentations, or did you want to take a couple questions quickly?
No, I'm fine.
I think we do all three and then keep the questions. We'll have a lovely conversation at the end. Okay, so I learned something a little bit cultural this morning from Badarch. Right? This is, he's from Mongolia. This is his first name, and this is his last name, and in Mongolia you only ever use the first name. Alright, so we all learn something today. Thank you so much. So, go ahead, tell us what you have to tell us, because I think much better than anything I have to say.
Good morning, everybody. I am representing today UNESCO Institute for Information Technology related question. This is the only one UNESCO Institute, belongs to UNESCO, as a part of UNESCO, which is focused only on ICT and education. This institute established in 1997 and located in India-Russian Federation in Moscow. First of all, I would like to express my thanks to Professor Jan Wagner and his team for excellent arrangement for me to be here with you today. I also commend the UNESCO chair for learning and literacy for their excellent job through its extensive research and innovation. by using cutting-edge methodologies like MOOC for developing this concept. So today, before coming to my main topic, I would like to remind you that UNESCO is the lead agency for the Education for All movement, global movement, which was adopted in 2000 in Dakar, Senegal. We have 6 EFA goals, and I would like to just give you some facts of education around the world, which is provided by the EFA Global Monitoring Report, this year's monitoring report. According to this Global Monitoring Report, today 50% of young children in the world have access to free primary education, the early child education. But still 57 million children are out of school. The most importantly, 774 million adults are illiterate. So two-thirds of them are women. There is, at the global level, learning crisis. Why UNESCO is saying that? Because 250 million children are not learning basics, the reading and mathematics, and this learning crisis hits the most disadvantaged. In order to achieve EFA goal by 2015, there is need for 5.3 million teachers to be recruited. So this is the real situation in the world about the education. So when we are talking about the bottom of the pyramid, I think this is the real picture, what we have at the bottom of the pyramid. So key messages of our report is that by 2015, many countries will still not have reached EFA goals. This is the first message. Then there is the global learning crisis that is hitting the disadvantaged people hardest. So good quality education can only be achieved with good quality teachers. And when the world leaders and education and regionals now debating on the post-2015 agenda, there is the one message that global education goals after 2015 must track progress of the marginalized people. This is the important. And also there is the issue of the balance. So, as I said, I am representing the UNESCO Institute for Information Technology in Education, IITE. So we are doing policy advocacy, capacity development, and knowledge services to the member states, UNESCO member states. So today I would like to talk about the 2 projects of our institute. The one is the OER case studies, and then ICT in primary education. During the last 5 years, the UNESCO IIT has been implemented its own OER initiative. The main objective of these initiatives are to promote the OER movement in non-English speaking countries. So we have been commissioned several case studies. This is the latest one in Poland. What is the situation with the development and promotion of OER in Poland? Now we are working on OER in France. It will come out in very soon. So all these publications are free of charge on our website. So the findings of these case studies quite similar what was said by previous speakers, because the main barriers are language barriers, especially for non-English speaking countries. A lot of teachers, they don't know about copyright issues. So this is the lack of awareness within the educators and teaching staff. In some countries, especially former Soviet countries and Central Asian countries, there are technological barriers, economic issues, and open licensing is not in place in many countries in that region. And also, one interesting aspect is that there is the lack of sharing culture in former Soviet countries, I mean. So, and also there is the almost not known the pedagogy, how to deal with OER, how to use it, how to integrate it in education, learning and teaching. So, but meantime, there are several initiatives coming. So what behind these initiatives, what the drivers? This is the teachers are very much interested in innovative teaching methods and resources. Some of the innovative teachers. They also willingness to expand access of students to their materials. Desire to enhance the visibility of the university. And also some of them thinking about to get additional merits, scores during their appraisal. What was the interesting findings from the Poland report is that they are facing big difficulties with the publishers. What you just told us, this is the situation in Poland. In terms of the France, we find out that they would like to have the just single platform for all open educational resources. They are planning to move that way because they are saying that there are plenty of materials, but it's very difficult to find good materials which is credible to use in the teaching. Second project is ICT in primary. I have to say that in 2010, we have produced this first book on recognizing the potential of ICT in early childhood education. This is the first in this kind of materials, quite well received by communities, educational community, and there are a lot of initiatives at this very early stage of learning. And then we decided to launch a new project which called ICT in primary education. It's a 3 years project, and so we are now completing it. So we have invited 10 scholars, very strong scholars from different countries, and they worked during these 3 years and produced the first book. This is the ICT in primary education. This is actually the collection of the best practices, in which countries, what kind of new initiatives implemented or implementing in the field of ICT in primary. We are now close to publish 2 new books. The one is the policy in practice and the recommendation. So I just say a few words about some of the questions which will be reflected in this book. This is what is the 21st century primary school? What is it? Why ICT in primary? In terms of the technology and content, how ICT and digital content chosen or deployed. In technology and pedagogy issues also, limitations and concerns, equal chances, inequality, which was raised this morning, and the major changes into, when you integrate ICT in primary education, children's perspective and sharing good practices. So these questions will be reflected in our book, second book. The third book is the collective case study of promising practices. About 10-15 countries case studies will be reflected in this book. And then what is interesting is that we announced the MOOC on this project. And so in cooperation with University of London, this course was announced using Coursera platform. You can find it, you can register it. Currently, this course is actually focused on educators and teachers and those who are working with primary education. So it might be interesting. It will start on the 27th of May. Thank you.
So to sum it up, 3 books in a MOOC, right?
Yes.
All right, let me stop this and start again. So we have Ticora Jones from USA, and go ahead, tell us what you want to
If you want to just go ahead and cover that up so we don't have any more, turn it off so we don't get any
it's
additional
very
heat.
hot.
Good, everybody's still awake in the very warm room.
There you go.
Great.
Awesome.
So, good morning everyone. My name is Sakura Jones. I am the Program Director for the Higher Education Solutions Network at USAID in the newly launched Global Development Lab at USAID, which we just had our big announcement April 3rd with former Secretary Clinton. So everyone's still recovering from the large announcement, but we are continuing to move forward with a very exciting platform of programs that we have undertaken in the last 4 years. I'm here partly on behalf of my colleagues who are in the Office of Education, who we work very closely with, but also to talk about some of the things that we have been doing as an agency as it relates to thinking about online educational resources and how we use them in development. Very briefly, we actually just relaunched our mission statement, and it is, we partner to end extreme poverty, to promote resilient democratic societies while advancing arcs of security and prosperity. And one of the, for me, the most critical word in that is the second one, the partner part. But it's also advancing our collective security and prosperity, and one of the ways that we do that is through our education programs. In addition to the many ways that we've worked with the higher education community, we've had a very strong kind of primary education focus. But one of the things that we've seen as it relates to the online educational resource space is that in part, kind of like you were saying, Rory, that you are now finally the princess from the Cinderella. That's great, by the way. One of the things that we're seeing is that some of the approaches that we have taken through distance education that have been using radios, because you're working in low resource environments and you're trying to figure out ways to disseminate content, and that happens in a lot of different ways, but the kind of methodologies that we as an agency have been using as it related to radio can then relate to how we think differently about how we distribute digital content as well. Because it can't just be broadcasting it over the air, there also has to be a human associated with it in some way. So that element of localization and personalization is very critical. But one of the other ways that we as an agency are thinking differently about the online educational resource is how we deploy it as it relates to our workforce development kinds of activities and programs. Just because a MOOC is available, as we've seen kind of this disparity between who can use it and who can't, and who understands kind of the power of the content and who doesn't. Just because something is available doesn't mean that it's packaged in a way that if I, as a nursing student in Ghana, are interested in kind of building my skills and using this as a way to kind of get additional information or ground truthing or foundational information. There's no good way at this point for us to think about how the online educational resources, as they are available, can be kind of yelped, as it were. So there might be a whole lot of stuff out there, but that doesn't mean that it's appropriate for your context and your local environment. And so we're trying to think differently about a couple of different things. One of them is how content can be rated, so that as people are looking for different types of opportunities given their context, they know what kinds of things could be in that accredited organization, even if we are dealing with a very large organizations like edX and Coursera and many of the others. But it's also this notion of packaging things, so that if you are a student who is still unsure of the course that you would like to take, there can be ways to package the information so it's not just kind of a free-for-all that may be perceived on any side of the online educational resource spectrum, especially if you were trying to build your own skills. So those are two of the ways, both this kind of notion of aggregating the content that's available and providing ratings that are associated with it, working with organizations that are doing that, are some of the ways that we are thinking differently about online educational resources. And then the second piece, which is most closely aligned with the work that we do through the Higher Education Solutions Network, is to think differently about how courses are deployed such that they think about problem solving. So our colleague this morning talked about the MOOC, yet another fun acronym that we can all collectively use, but I would say the MOOCs, the Massive Open Online Course on Problem Solving. In part because as we think about how we engage students, how, and students, I think of students, I still think of myself as a student, as a lifelong learner, but how we are engaging students around problem solving so that they see which skills come to the table in which ways, and how all of those things must be additive in a multidisciplinary fashion around a problem. It gives you a different feel for kind of, as my former boss, Alex Dagan, used to say, not what is your major, but what is your problem? What is the problem that you are trying to solve? How are you thinking differently about engaging a multitude of resources and your colleagues from different departments and different divisions, and how you think of that about that problem? One of those problems could be, for example, securing water for food. That's one of the grand challenges that we as an agency launched a couple months ago, actually. But one could imagine, as we kind of proceed down this path, if that notion of that being defined as the problem, securing water for food, that has very localized implications, it has international implications, and there are many different ways that you could imagine students that are coming from a wide variety of disciplines and backgrounds coming together, thinking about that problem from their context. That is a learning opportunity that then gets people beyond the notion of academia for academia's sake only, but learning and problem solving at the same time. And so this is one of the really exciting things that we are starting to think about through the Higher Education Solutions Network, and we have colleagues that are at the Resilient Africa, through the Resilient Africa Network, which is one of the programs that we sponsor through the network, that are thinking differently about how you are developing technology in the African context, but part of that is essentially understanding the community's challenges and articulating those to a variety of innovators, both African and American, and then in kind of a massive open online course or a mini MOOC type of format to help facilitate that kind of different thinking and problem solving that dig deeper into those notions. Aside from that, some of the other kinds of ways that we are looking at different ways of dealing with online educational resources is our colleagues that are at Digital Green, for example. They take that radio model and kind of flip it into the digital model, but they also localize it because they essentially make stars of local folks as they are thinking about agricultural extension. And so instead of it being someone on a screen that you watch that you don't know, they continually think about how to get into a community, localize localize in a manner that videotapes practitioners that are within that community and allows that to be part of the learning process, but also part of the community building process. So it's not just some unknown person that you're seeing on the screen, it could be your cousin. And so that's another very different way of us thinking about how online educational resources can be localized and personalized so that you are engaging a community in the collective learning experience. Because it is very hot in here and we are at time, I will stop now, but happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Wow, you are 4 minutes under, so you are. So let's go for questions, people. There we go. Just give us your name.
My name is Stephen Luke, and I'm from an organization called FHI 360, which is a large international NGO trying to leverage open and distance learning across a number of different contexts. I'm very interested in open educational resources. And as Georgie mentioned, you're working with some organizations to help aggregate, rate, and to, you mentioned one other thing I took in my notes, but I was curious if you might be able to provide some resources as to where we'd be able to find some of
It's
those.
actually a different colleague of mine that's working on that, so we can talk later on that.
Oh, sure.
And I can give you
I would also like to get those resources.
So we can come together and have that conversation.
Yeah.
Excuse me, is it possible to get the slides from your presentation?
And they're on the computer here, you can email me, I can put them in Dropbox.
But perhaps other panelists also are aware of different attempts to aggregate and sort of
What we
rate.
do, if you go to call.org, commonwealthlearning.org, col.org, and go to their publications, there's a publication there. I wish I could remember the name, but I wrote it. It's a blue publication about OER, and it's got a long list of all the search engines and about 20 places where you find open education
It's called
resources.
Creating, Using, and Sharing Open Educational Resources by Rory McGreal.
Okay.
On the publications page.
Yeah.
Tell us the name of collaborative learning.
Creating, Using, and Sharing Open Educational Resources.
It's a small pamphlet, really.
Yeah. But the larger question is, does the organization of the conference will provide the PowerPoint of the presenters and the videos of the presentations? Is that a plan as after the conference? Or
Videos will be posted on our website. We can, if willing, we can get the PowerPoints as well.
that'd be great.
Thank you
If
so
it would be
much.
centrally organized, it'd be nice.
Yes, we will then
Right.
really good.
You can just enter even Dropbox if you need to.
And I can take your information afterwards personally to follow up. I'm happy to use it.
Hi, my name is Rory. I'm working at the World Bank and working on the project in Tajikistan trying to switch from the correspondence learning to distance learning actually. So we are thinking about how we can best curate the courses from local context, and also if you want to use better or better quality materials from international, what will be the best way, who should be the curator of those courses, and then how we should also make sure that the teachers will not be threatened by using other courses, and then how we can incentivize teachers, for example, to make their courses better for the new online content creation, for example. So if you have any tips on this kind of operationalizing the creation and implementation for OER, that would be great.
Well, this is a problem. And what we're doing, and I can give you an idea of what we're doing, if we're going, who should be responsible? It has to be the professor at the university level, the instructor, because of academic freedom regulations. So they have full control over that. But quite often, I don't know how many have read Mark Twain's Pudd'nhead Wilson book, the guy with the two heads, and one head drank and the other one got the hangover. And it's like that. The professor picks the book, and he doesn't even know the price, that it's $250. And then he gives it to the students, and the students get the headache. So that's a problem. We have to educate our professors about that. And also to show them how to visit and get to look at all of these amazing things that are out there and what's being developed all the time, so as they can do it. So what we're doing that now and showing our professors, well, you could take out that commercial content, and you can put in this old OER. We call it de-owning our courses. And so that's another way. The other way, though, and it depends on your legal jurisdiction, but I know in the British Commonwealth countries and the United States, we have extensive fair dealing and fair use rights for commercial content. And in Canada, it was just reinforced by the Supreme Court that it must be given a large and liberal interpretation. We can use portions of text, commercial text, and we should take wide and broad advantage of that. The other thing we can do is link. You can link to anything and make it part of your course. So these are the things we need to educate our instructors about, so as they do, to make them more aware. And we're in that process now. We're at the beginning stages.
My name is Stefan Bozaitan from Egypt. I manage an online platform called Tahrir Academy. It's basically designs learning experiences for Egyptian teens and youth. My question is for Rory, actually. You mentioned in your presentation on accreditation that it's done by institutions. The accreditation issue was also mentioned in the morning, and whenever I see accreditation and open access brought up together, I think of an oxymoron. Because you spoke of open assessment, and I really like the concept. Why don't we change our paradigm towards open accreditation as well? Because accreditation could be, especially in the developing world, could be taken as a tool to monopolize the content and limit the access to the content, because there are institutions that will always be upfront claiming credibility and claiming legitimacy and keeping this content within the confines of these institutions themselves. So what do you think about that?
Well, we're already in a process of change now with badges that are being given out. The MOOCs are giving out these certificates, and it seems that employers are beginning to accept them. And in Brazil, there's been a huge project where they have mini courses in all kinds of IT related, how to do Word, how to do Excel, hundreds of skill-based things for people. And they give out, you finish it and you print out your certificate. And now it's so successful that people are counterfeiting the certificates because they help you get a job. So that's happening now. The other thing is that we as a university are responsible for saying that you do know that stuff. If we say he knows second year French, then he better know second year French. And so it's our responsibility to do that. And I don't know any way other than a closed way of doing that. We can give an open exam, but even that's sort of closed to your university. And we are looking at these issues of doing that. But right now, it has to be closed. And how do you get to fully open? I don't know. I think we're going through a stage where it'll be mixed. We'll have mixed.
And if I could just add on to that, there's the kind of official university side. Think about the community health worker side. There are a number of NGOs that are already kind of doing that type of, they have their own mobiles, they have their own kind of contracts that they've set up with the governments, and so like they've got some of those pieces of the transfer of information worked out. But because they are community health workers and because they may be working for an NGO or for the Ministry of Health, there's a certain level of kind of training that they need to receive. And so, the university side and kind of the traditional accreditation is one thing, but if you're thinking also about kind of extension and development and those kinds of things that aren't necessarily in the traditional university system, there are already people who are working through some of those kinds of, not quite accreditation, but a certification type of situation where they are training their community health workers. I saw Chuck Slarty, which is he's the CEO of Living Goods, and they have kind of an Avon Lady Colony model for how they deploy their community health workers. And a lot of the work that they do is mobile. So they've got mobile money where, that's where your transfer happens. They're based in Kenya, but they also have mobile training and certain kinds of things that they are taking diagnostics for the children that they're treating. But a lot of everything that they do is within the mobile that they have.
Another person mentioned about professional societies doing it, but our experience is that professional societies are there to keep people out. George Bernard Shaw said that professions are conspiracies against lay people, and he was right. So they're not very, very helpful in promoting it, sorry.
Yeah, come back to the previous question. I just would like to share my own experience working in the former Soviet countries. I think it might be good that in those countries there is no open education source, no OER. But they have so-called,
a lot of Russian content.
yes, they have so-called electronic textbooks. So they are using, there is no copyright. Copyright issues is still there. So many governments in Kazakhstan, in other countries, in Uzbekistan, they have a special government program reducing the electronic resources. So I think this approach might be good for the government of Tajikistan. Tajikistan is the most poorest country in that region. So they don't even some places, they don't have electricity. So you have to understand that. And then I don't say that you don't try to convince them to have the OER, but open licensing. You have to try it, but meantime you have to also convince the government to put money to produce the electronic content, digital content. Then it might be work. And second issue is that if you look at the experience of China, Chinese government is working not only developing own resources, but also translating English resources, which is the contextually appropriate to this country. So this is there might be interesting because many engineering universities, they are looking for MIT courses and the other universities courses. And so translation of the existing OER courses, it might be useful.
Thank you. Okay, go with you now.
Yeah, well, I think your question was very relevant and how we can open up the accreditation system. From my experience, fortunately or unfortunately, the system of IGs work and certification you're talking about works better in the IT sector. Because, the best made IT professionals are from the universities, so they can have their own system. But when you come to other subject matters, then we have a problem there. And I think that perhaps the system of OERU is very, very useful, when people can learn from anywhere and content and go to any university and sit the exam. If they get certification from that university, it means that they're constantly in control. But I think that's it's a very complex thing in Africa, where still employees would like to see your formal degree. And just an experience we had at the EBU, because we are hiring some IT people, we come up with a system of portfolio, where we ask you to send us your portfolio. It's a part of the assessment to hire. And we come across this one gentleman who didn't have a bachelor degree, but was the best. He had a diploma, and we hired him. And I think that, but it would take time for employees to change their mind to go this way. Until this happened, we will have to go through the formal accreditation.
I have a question for Rory. I was a bit surprised when you said that the English as an international language is important so we can reach far more learners. And I think that's, at least in my mind, a real issue with massive open online education. Kind of perpetuates the power of English, so the language of power, power of language. We haven't come up with any model yet that would help us translate that content into local languages, but from looking at it from a different perspective, we also know that children learn best in their native language. So how do you kind of bring these two elements together?
I think it's a very important issue, as you've got the problem of the global and the local. But if the world is going global, the economy of the world is global, and people need English. And this isn't something that is nice to do or anything like that. If you want to participate in the global economy, you pretty well need English, and I think most governments around the world understand that. And so, yes, but this is then problematic. How is that going to affect its, those who say, well, it's imperialism, linguistic imperialism, yeah, I guess it is, but at the same time, they do. Now, I think we need to support local languages and as much as possible, but I know in Canada, they will not translate from English to French. We have a French minority. They have to do it in French themselves. They just will not translate. And so they do, but their textbooks are very expensive, and it's a problem. And so it's an ongoing problem, and I don't think there'll be a solution to it. There's a balance that each country will have to make for itself between the local language and English. But if you don't know English and you're participating in the world global economy, you're at a major disadvantage,
Well, Coursera has also been doing, they get community members to translate English language content. I mean, you know, there are people, I think, who are making some sort of gesture towards increasing access through language translation, but, you know, whether it is accurate and
But even if it's accurate, you're taking an English conception of the world and putting it into your language, which is problematic.
No, very much so, very much so. Well, let's get somebody else.
I was just going to comment, don't you think that might be change over time?
Yeah.
That one graph this morning that showed the curve where Europe was behind the United States and Canada in starting the work on MOOCs. You know, I don't know where Latin America is, but you can imagine a lot of Spanish content coming online as other regions of the world start to take this up. So anyway, it's a problem, but maybe it'll get better, not worse, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really understand your point regarding this question, and I believe you're being pragmatic in a way. But I also believe that this question has a normative element. Because at the end of the day, me coming from Egypt and the Arab world, we contribute 3% of the content on the web, for example, and we're a 300 million population. This creates a lot of inequalities on the social, cultural, economic, and all levels actually. Without access to content in the native language, it becomes a vicious cycle actually. And waiting for the institutions to be able to teach masses of people the English language is actually something that's far-fetched because they're unable to teach them the native language actually. So I don't know, in Arabic we have the colloquial language, which is accessible by everyone, and we have the Fusha, which is the more traditional. So the traditional language is deteriorating big time. So I believe we again, the native language question is a huge issue, because unless we give access and create content in the native languages, I don't believe MOOCs will do what's it's done in essence, which is giving access.
Okay, Dan.
Yeah, I'm sorry I had to miss a lot of this because I'm having to roll around.
You really missed Africa.
But I wanted just to say, Ticora, I had to miss your, hi. But I wanted to say, and I think maybe Professor Rory will say something after, but what's very interesting on the language question, not a new question, of course, everybody in the room is very familiar with the language issue. What's interesting is that USAID has done a complete flip in the last 5 years and has moved toward mother tongue instruction, as you know. So it isn't as if people in the world and development agencies, and you may have said this already, I don't know, but it's not at all clear. I think there are a lot of things I like about your presentation, Rory, but on this particular issue, I think the jury is out, and there certainly is no agreement that MOOCs or instruction should be in any particular language, though your points are well taken from the perspective that you have. I'd like to see if Rory would like to say.
Yeah, I just also hit the end of the discussion. And, my take on that is that for the moment, MOOCs is really focusing on post-secondary education, so that you have the tertiary, and basically when you look at the whole world, you will notice that 19% only would have access to MOOCs, and out of those 19%, the tertiary does not represent education for all. And the rationale of this meeting is based on all those questions that relate to the use of MOOCs for all, with all the questions that we will be discussing, this today and tomorrow, namely access, integration, capacity in terms of numbers, capacity to scale, and of course costs and everything. And the language issue is always there, even though it does not really take a lot of discussion, because it's a difficult one. It's not that it can be answered by us or, in this meeting or in the coming, 2 or 3 years meetings on MOOCs. But I think that we should focus on, are MOOCs possible for education for all? And if we do try to answer those questions, then we are immediately faced with content, we are immediately faced with the language issue, and we have no hope, we have no way of saying anything about the future for books at the level of this pyramid, bottom up, without dealing with it. So I'm very happy to say that, yes, at the level of tertiary, English could be, a very welcome, possibility. But as soon as you look at, primary and secondary school education, it's clear that you have to factor in the language issue.
I was going to say that as an interim solution, I heard Daphne Kohler of Coursera say that there are a lot of grassroots efforts to translate existing MOOCs into the local language in India and Russia.
We already do this with Khan Academy. We
Yes.
translated 400 videos for them in their partnership agreement.
Yeah.
But again, how the users perceive the content is completely different. Yeah.
Question at this time. My understanding from discussion with other UNESCO colleagues is that the promotion of OER materials is done in countries where there is some receptivity to this, and that for countries where there is dominant publishing industries, that at the moment these are not being promoted so much just because of challenges working with the publishing industry. I wonder, in the context of the conversation about OER, how do we engage, if at all, the sort of traditional publishing industry that might be threatened by a movement like this?
Well, it is interesting that the biggest publishers are in the United States, and America is leading in OER. And I'm very happy to say that as a Canadian, because quite often we don't say nice things about the United States.
I'm married to a Canadian.
America is leading in open educational resources, and I think that that's really important. The publishers have a real problem, and they have to compete with free. And I think we're going to have big battles over this. There is in Poland going on now a major thrust by the publishers to oppose it. They've tried in the U.S. Congress to bring in, to stop Obama's initiative. I don't think it's over. I think we're going to have a big fight with them. They're not going to like this at all. They're bring out all their guns because, let's face it, in education, it's a gravy train. It sucks money right from the government through the student and the institution right into their hands, and with very little work on their part. And this gravy train is just wonderful for them, so they're going to fight to keep it as long as possible.
Right. There are places, though, that we've been working as an organization to kind of democratize more of that kind of virtual science library, for example. So we've got a couple of different ways that we work with publishers to make science resources more easily accessible, because those are some of the most expensive things that you find out there. But there are programs that have worked within our organization to essentially reduce or eliminate some of that cost based on kind of the cost per user type of situation. One of my former colleagues worked on a virtual science library for Iraq, where essentially the resources were made completely free and available. But it still has to be this kind of negotiated thing between a country and its capabilities, probably a mediating organization and the publisher. But it is possible to do it.
I think also, certainly from the PEN perspective in dealing with MOOCs, when we wanted to use licensement, and now I'm doing music, I think it's going to be a totally different story because I've used YouTube and they don't want me to use YouTube. But I know that for other kinds of published resources, they've negotiated individually with each publisher and had some pretty good cooperation because it's in the interest of the publisher at some level to cooperate. But I don't think if it were, hundreds and hundreds of pages, it would work. that there are limited numbers of resources.
To what degree is USAID or other donors looking at really investing in centers of excellence in Africa or in Asia, other places, to really build that capacity to develop more localized content? Because the point of origin of a lot of content is coming out of traditional places that have been doing it for 5 years or 20 years or 30 years. It's obviously holding back some of the other ways that we really get to localized content.
I can't say that I can answer that question with confidence right now, but I'm sure my colleagues in the education division, as they're thinking about workforce development, are really looking at that issue and where we are looking for the kinds of localized, kind of locally generated content that we know is necessary.
Well, do you want to say one more thing? Because I think we're out of time. Finish.
I'd just like to say, and it's something we haven't touched on, that the idea of people get frightened of these massive courses and that they're going to lose their jobs and everything. And what I see as a world is if we have millions of students on massive courses, this will release many teachers to teach in small groups. And I think the way, if you believe in small group teaching, and I think the research shows that if you get below 20, there are positive effects for the lower number of students. If you get above 20, we don't have any evidence to show that it's 30 is better than 50 or 500 or whatever. We don't have that. But we do know that small groups work. And that if we have large numbers of students taking these courses and learning as independent learners, and we train our students to become independent learners, then we will have all kinds of teaching resources to work in small groups, especially with the students who particularly need it. So some say, oh, it's the bad mass and you don't believe in small. I believe in small. I think this is the way to achieve small in a cost-effective way for governments, and people don't think in those terms, that they're not mutually exclusive. In fact, they're complementary.
Badarch, do you want to have a final word, and Ticora, final word, and we'll wrap up?
As an international intergovernmental organization, UNESCO respects the cultural diversity. That's why we respect that the language issue, the local, especially the local language issue, we respect that. So UNESCO findings said that if children learn in their own mother language, that knowledge will remain whole life. So therefore, the gentleman said that for the primary, secondary education, it might be good to have the instruction in local languages. Because in higher education, you can see that many universities in developing countries, they are moving to English instruction, they're using English materials. So there is the knowledge. But for the secondary level, it's got issue. So this is what I would like to say.
I just want to think of us, I just want all of us to think of learners as problem solvers. And so as we think about how we engage them and what we engage them with, that we find ways to really kind of tap into their, like little kids are already, they want to be engineers, they want to design things, they want to take things apart, and we kind of beat them out of them. We beat that out of them through how we educate them. So I think that we should challenge ourselves to think of how we create lifelong designers and builders and problem solvers, and not just think about it as educating.
All right. Well, wonderful panel. Thank you very much.